And it's Danny Goki on Rhema with Make a Difference. Sounds like a good political slogan. Actually, doesn't it? We can make a difference. Together we can do more. Or perhaps we're in it to win it and we'll ditch any unpopular policy to get there. That seems to be the strategy of the Labour Party, but they couldn't have planned the terrible week that they had last week. Or could they? Joining us on the program now from the Maxim Institute, Executive Director Tim Wilsons. Tim, kia ora. Thank you for your time today.
Kia ora, Andrew. Great to be with you. And I'm just for those watching, I'm working from home. For those listening, I'm also working from home. It's the vibe. You can just
it is the vibe, Your Honour. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. So look, you've actually raised something very interesting in terms of we were having a discussion. We just put out. We're doing a regular podcast on the election, and one of us said, well, maybe this terrible week. So what did you have? You had Kitty Allen crashing a car, the Justice Minister being pursued by police dogs, having to evacuate her portfolio, David Parker, Revenue Minister, quitting on a point of principle, which is, we can unpack that a bit later, and then leaks at the end of the week. And we were discussing this, like Labour's rotten week, Labour's the worst week imaginable. And then someone said, well, maybe they had a whiteboard session. And they said, we've got all this bad stuff that's going to happen. Can we get it all out of the way in one go?
Yeah.
Otherwise, imagine if these things, Andrew, it had occurred. So 1 week, Kitty Allen, everything's about Kitty Allen.
Yeah.
Next week, David Parker, everything's about David Parker. Leaking. Oh, there's problems in the Labour caucus. Yak.
Exactly.
So who knows?
And now that all did happen in 1 week. Whether it was by planning, I doubt it, honestly. But actually, if it could have been worse in that if it was over a period of weeks, there's only weeks to go into the election if you count it that way. And hopefully all the bad stuff is behind them. But so's public confidence in some ways, it would seem.
Yeah, and I'm interested in your view on this because we saw, when we saw ministers quitting, we saw Michael Wood, we saw the issue with Antonetti misleading Parliament, a whole bunch of that sort of stuff. I wasn't sure as to why the polls were what they were. Now the polls are starting to shift. We saw a Roy Morgan poll just this morning where the centre-right again increased their margin. Labour and the Greens dropped 5 points to 35%. But I just wonder how much of the stuff, I'm interested in your take, penetrates from the Beltway, which are people like us who are political tragics who will talk about this stuff, and just where the for want of a better word, voter with other stuff to think about, but whether that penetrates. Sometimes I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, we wait and see, I suppose. One of the worst outcomes all round would be if this just sort of secures apathy as the winner on the day, that people saying, oh gosh, none of these politicians are trustworthy. What's the point of even voting? However, to be fair, from Christopher Luxon's point of view, if he loses this election, he's more talented than people are giving him credit for, because it would take a very talented person to lose the election from this point onwards, whether it's Labour voters not turning up or whether it's people just getting cynical about politics.
Yeah. And look, I think it's interesting. There was a poll of SMEs, small to medium enterprises, small businesses, basically done by MyOB, which is it's an accounting firm. Yep. And 64% of those small business owners want a change of government. So I suspect the apathy might be more located in Labour supporters rather than in those who are planning to vote for another party. And also, I think, I think who's going to really benefit from this, I think I sense you're right. I think National is playing a very risk-averse strategy.
Yeah.
And perhaps that doesn't create momentum. But what I'm seeing is, I don't know if you're seeing this too, is the sort of an extremity election, if you like, where the parties on what was previously called the margins, parties like ACT, parties like Te Pāti Māori, in the Roy Morgan poll, they jumped up. They're up at 6% now. Mm-hmm. Winston Peters, never write him off. Roy Morgan, the Roy Morgan polls, they tend to be somewhat discounted because they can be a bit fluctuating, but back at 5%. So could we see 2017, Winston the Kingmaker? who knows?
No, I mean, that would make it certainly interesting. And I take your point about the smaller parties, although from Te Pāti Māori's point of view and with the Greens, although they are down in the latest poll, they might get a slightly bigger percentage in opposition. But it looks like, well, it would seem very unlikely that they're going to, particularly those two parties, be part of a coalition government. Winston Peters is an interesting one, a late charge from Winston, but again, you can never write him off. And actually, maybe this if he can motivate the disgruntled, if he can motivate the people that are just sick of what's happening, and there's quite a few out there.
Plenty of those out there, Andrew, exactly. And have you met Winston Peters?
Yes, I've interviewed him a few times. He's a bunch of fun.
He really is. And he's got these twinkling eyes. I mean, I've only met him once, but it's just like this. He's a very, I guess where I'm going with this is that he is a very instinctual politician.
Yes.
So a lot of, and saw an interesting article recently about all of the spin doctors that Labour and National have working for them. Winston doesn't need a spin doctor because he's had years in politics. He has an incredible instinct for what motivates an electorate. So I think that I think you're right.
He is the doctor of his own party in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's the doctor and the patient.
Yeah. Hey, this is a very interesting week, and I mean, it's unlikely that we'll get this sort of spectacle as we head towards the election. Having said that, though,
do you want to put money on that, Andrew? Do you want to put, go $5? Do you really think so?
Well, yeah, no, I'm very much in a wait and see. I'll keep the $5 in my pocket. Thanks for the offer, though. I do think, though, that this is a particularly good week for you guys to start a podcast, the Maximise the Election podcast that's kicked off, and certainly that fictitious whiteboard meeting gave you guys plenty of things to chat about. It was a fun conversation, Tim.
Yeah, no, look, it's and one of the things too we want to, and please go and visit the Maxim website, maxim.org.nz. The podcast's up on there. We always want to end on a hopeful note, so we have a thing called Generally Good Egg of the Week. Yeah. So where we pick the people who've done something that we like, or groups that have behaved well, and so we do that also. So there's amongst all of this apathy and uncertainty and disgruntlement, there's a wee beacon of hope.
Yes, and I was listening to it earlier on, and actually the media got a mention towards the good egg thing, which is, it's been a while. It's been a long time since the media got a shout out for good behaviour, particularly in an election year. Hey, Tim, really value what you do, maxim.org.nz, and do recommend people subscribe to the podcast. Maximise the Elections 2023. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Ka kite, Andrew. Thank you.